Hello everyone. So we're going to talk about the compliant INFJ again, the one I like to call the adaptive submissive INFJ. This is one of our more insecure leaning kinds of INFJ alongside the solipsistic INFJ, as you know. The compliant INFJ is a very, very common kind of INFJ. It is possible and even likely that it is the most common kind of INFJ, and that inside all of us, even among us who perhaps are more spiritualized or engaged on a more spiritualized path at this point, there is still a little compliant INFJ baby sometimes talking through us. The compliant INFJ is very common because in some ways it is the most natural defense against the difficulty of living in the world as an INFJ and having that particular, very peculiar kind of worldview, that very strange kind of NI-infused worldview. But also because it is also possible that the nature and structure of the modern world and the postmodern world make it even harder for INFJs to find the world a habitable place as INFJs, and therefore the need for this defense makes itself all the more pressing. Okay. Now that's also assuming that their childhood, the childhood of the INFJ in question, was not always an easy one, because when I say easy, I should retract this word and say a good one. A good childhood is not just an easy childhood. It involves what Heinz Kohut, the psychoanalyst, calls optimal frustration. Enough frustration to learn, to follow the path to more autonomy, but certainly not too much frustration as to lead to a castration that only inhibits. Now, in the case of the compliant INFJ, there was castration, certainly at some level. So they did not become secure, and they became compliant. And the compliant INFJ, as you know, is an INFJ that is so eager to be accepted by other people. Compliant INFJs care a lot about how they're perceived by other people. Sometimes they're conscious of it, sometimes they're not as conscious of it as one might think. But they care a lot about how they're perceived by other people. They get easily upset when they feel like they're not being appreciated by other people, or they're being devalued by other people, or mocked by other people. They're very quick to feel shamed, guilted, excluded, and devalued. So they really put a premium on making sure that the acceptance and acknowledgement of other people, the other members of their tribe in the broad sense, making sure that this acknowledgement and this acceptance are secured. Right? Being insecure themselves, they try to find security in the outside world and in the protective shadow of the outside world, particularly the social world of other people. And for this reason, the compliant INFJ tends to lie to themselves a little bit. Then they're not living in accordance with the requirements of NI. They're blocking NI. I like to say these days that NI is not really a function that we use as NI dominance. It would be a function we use if we were anything else than NI dominance. But as NI dominance, NI uses us, NI speaks through us. And for the adaptive INFJ, what's going on is that NI is blocked, NI is dammed up, NI is not given the opportunity to express themselves, because within NI is contained, and rightfully so, the observation of the compliant INFJ in this respect is very correct. NI contains the most intimate kernel of our authentic identity. And this is scary to the compliant INFJ, because the compliant INFJ unconsciously believes that if they were to show who they are to other people, they would be rejected. They will be rejected because they don't love who they are. And this is where you can sense that there is something insecure about their way of being. Often, like I always say, for reasons that are really understandable, given what they went through. It's not a question of casting judgments or anything of that sort. One has wounds, one has scars, and one deals with them as much as possible, as best as they can, And the adaptive INFJ is called adaptive because they are trying to adapt. It might be argued that ultimately those strategies are maladaptive, and more on this in a second, but still they are doing their best, okay? So why is it maladaptive? I think, well, interestingly, I'm not going to make a case here that the adaptive mode of being for an INFJ is maladaptive because it does not correspond to a kind of concept of what INFJ life should be like. It's tempting to think like that, right? You know, you devise some notion of what INFJ life should be like, live authentically, express your creativity, respect and nurture your worldview, and so forth. And then you sort of say, well, the adaptive submissive INFJ is not living up to these standards, therefore they're erring. You know, they're falling short. Now that would be a tempting route to follow, but a wrong route to follow. And the reason why it would be the wrong route to follow is because it's top down, it's abstract, and it does not take into account the individual peculiarities of each and every one, right? Even different INFJs have different life trajectories. Just because, you know, you're an INFJ alongside other INFJs does not mean that you have the same aspirations, needs, plans, goals, expectations, and so on. Ultimately, type is only, including the typology that I have built, type is only useful, type is only meaningful if it helps people. But when I say people, I mean each individual person. I don't mean people as a group, right? If it helps a lot of people, that's great, but that has to be this person and that person and that person, okay? And I think that the reason why I would call compliance maladaptive ultimately is not because it's falling short of some sort of INFJ ideal, right? Let's just forget about these ideals for a minute, okay? We're talking about people who are suffering. We're talking about people who are, you know, dealing with discomfort, existential discomfort. I don't believe, and it's based not on my abstractions here, but on my many discussions with adaptive INFJs, I believe that very objectively, very empirically, these people suffer, are frustrated and not satisfied. They're kind of locked inside these patterns of behavior, maladaptive, but still adaptive in their own kind of, you know, distorted fashion. It's hard to get out of those rhythms, even when the INFJ is aware that they are in those rhythms. But they want to feel better. And that's what matters with typology, is to help people feel better. It's not about reaching some kind of ideal. Like, it's not about being a megalomaniac. It's not about people feeding people's ego. I mean, it is for some people. It's not for me. I don't think it is for you either. So it's about helping people. It's about propelling people forward. If it can do this, then typology is more than justified. And in the case of the adaptive INFJ, the compliant INFJ, I think typology can give meaning, and in this sense it is very useful because it contributes to kind of articulating a narrative and creating a possible narrative of how a compliant INFJ might spiritualize or begin to spiritualize. Because typology is able to say, look, adaptive INFJs feel very anxious. Adaptive, submissive, compliant INFJs, same thing, are anxious people. They're easily on edge. They are highly strung. Those are obviously obstacles to well-being. That's why they don't want to be, they would prefer not to be compliant. They're stuck with maladaptive frameworks that both feel like they help them and actually, in fact, hardly suppress their anxiety and makes it more difficult to deal with. So that's the thing, right? It's anxiety, because anxiety, unexplainable or difficult to explain anxiety is one of the main sources of lack of well-being in the world for anyone, psychologically anyway, mental well-being. And so what typology can help us understand, particularly my typology in this case, is why do they feel this anxiety? It's not just that they're falling short of an authentic ideal. again. It's that by not being authentic, they are increasing in a very real, very concrete sense their anxiety. Because to be authentic is not just following a moral code, it's not just embodying a moral ideal. To be authentic to your dominant function in this case is also living in a state of flow, of harmony with your own natural rhythms, with who you are, with what you think, you know? And that the more you're able to lock into that natural flow, that oceanic living, well, of course, the less anxiety you will feel, because anxiety is usually born of intra-psychic conflict. It is intra-psychic conflict that creates the anxiety. That's where it comes from most of the time. And compliant INFJs are people who are full of conflict. And the most beautiful example, if I may use the word beautiful, is the conflict between telling people what they want to hear and unconsciously or inwardly believing it's just the opposite. Because there's going to be many examples of exactly that. I tell people what they want to hear because I want to belong, and yet I know it's not true, and I'm telling them things that are the opposite of what I actually think. Imagine the level of negative emotion that arises from that. Imagine the amount of conflict that keeps being fired up through a life spent in doing this, cultivating this attitude daily. It's life full of conflict. Now, this deserves more discussion. I'll do it in another video because this is getting long. Don't forget, guys, that I have written 2 books on the INFJ. The Infinite Soul, which looks precisely at how you can find meaning, purpose, and value through authentic INFJ life in a world we often find hostile. INFJ life in the modern world. Check the link below, as well as The Ecstatic Soul, which is my first book on the INFJ. Both books have helped a lot of people. I recommend check them out. A new look at the INFJ personality, which is the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. What's inside the mind? What is inside the INFJ mind? There's no book that goes deeper into this. Books go well together. And as you know, guys, I have a Patreon page. I could not do it without you guys. I produce videos on a daily basis. I try to make them high quality for you, but I also need your support. So please consider joining me on Patreon. There's a link below, and you get access to some cool perks, such as a Discord server called the Fourfold. Lots of cool conversations happening there. A bonus video content on Patreon every 2 weeks where I go in depth about particular topics of your choosing and more. So hopefully see you there, and I'll talk to you very soon.